Looking at the entire arena, so yes, forces are pulling out of Gaza. Just in the past 24 hours, Israeli strikes in Lebanon, Israeli strikes in Syria, and in the West Bank. As you mentioned, the operation is widening, and now is not only happening in the area of Jenin, but also to the southwest of there, in the area of Tulkarem, specifically the Tubas refugee camp. This is quite a flashpoint for militant activity in the West Bank, and Israeli forces have been operating there as well. People that did go back to the Jenin refugee camp are describing scenes similar to those seen from Gaza. People are saying that they cannot go back to their homes, and we can only assume that in a few more days these will also be the voices coming out of Tubas. Israel is extremely concerned of the rise in militant activity seen in the West Bank. Just in the past few weeks, there have been plenty of shooting attacks against the Israeli vehicles, Israeli buses in the army checkpoints in the West Bank, with various people killed, and clearly a concern in the rise of militant activity, and also a concern in the rise of popularity of Hamas in the West Bank. Every Saturday, along with the release of Israeli hostages, hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners are returning back home. As far as the Palestinians are concerned, this is happening only because of Hamas and its activity against Israel. It is adding to the popularity of Hamas in the West Bank. It is adding, according to Israel, to militant activity. And the Israeli forces are trying to do whatever they can to prevent the rise of this activity, most of the time with success, but not always. There is still quite a rise in militant activity.
And an Israeli delegation has arrived in Qatar for the next round of negotiations. Jonathan, what is still on the table to discuss?
It was actually 6 days ago, in day 16 of the first phase of the ceasefire, in which negotiations should have begun on the second stage of the ceasefire. It has not really happened. Israel said that the negotiations carried out by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the United States with the Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, they signaled the beginning of those negotiations. But if we're looking for something big happening in Qatar, it has not happened yet, and it will not happen with the current delegation in Qatar. We're not seeing there the head of the Israeli Security Agency or the head of the Israeli Secret Service, the Mossad. This is a lower level delegation, a work level delegation dealing with technical issues, but not with very big issues on the agenda. That is not happening yet. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to land in Israel in the coming 2 hours back from Washington. Then he's supposed to convene the Security Cabinet, and maybe then after that we will see a higher level delegation heading to Qatar for talks on the second phase of the ceasefire. There's a lot of pressure on the government to proceed with that, especially after the images seen yesterday with 3 hostages returning home. Those are good news, but the situation in which they came back, very thin, very pale, very weak, that of course caused a lot of alarm in Israel. It was thought that hostages will come back this way, but for the first time Israelis saw this with their eyes, and it creates a lot of pressure on the government. But Netanyahu has his own calculations, of course, his coalition, what will happen with his coalition if he goes to the second phase, what will Ben Gvir and Smotrich have to say about that. All this is now up to Benjamin Netanyahu to decide. But for the current delegation in Qatar, we should not expect a lot of progress just out of that.